Hello. I believe we are live already, actually. I didn't mean to go live, but hey,
Thanks for breaking shit.
yeah, OBS, shit.
Okay,
Um, hey, welcome to the
do I
Red
do I
Eye
sound all
stream.
right?
Yeah, you sound fine. Welcome to the Red Eye stream. I believe we are, yeah, okay. Today we're gonna talk about movies and TV. I put 80s in there because, fuck it, why not? Like, let's talk about Alf and shit. Remember the Breakfast Club? Yeah.
I try not to. God, that the "Don't You Forget About Me" song by Simple Minds was depressing as all get out.
Lies. Come on.
No, it was a depressing ass song. I have never liked that song because it's depressing and it's the antithesis of what the entire movie is. There's better actually there's better songs on that uh this thing. Wish there you know what I'm looking at something else. I wish there was a way to shrink the general. Anyway, oh no, that song was severely depressing, me at least, and I've never liked it, and it makes me want to kill myself. There were actually better songs, in my opinion, on that album, which is the epitome of the 1980s. I mean, if that, I mean, just those songs are so mind-bendingly, reality-smashingly generic on that album. And the movie is not bad, but I think that Fire in the Twilight was better, and We Are Not Alone was better. That actually had a very good synth pop, new wave, upbeat sound. It's the one where you see the little montage of the kids dancing on the furniture and all that stuff in the library. And I thought that was pretty darn good. That was better. The dream montage, which is it's basically an instrumental. It's the very light instrumental that it's like when Emilio Estevez's character, the jock, sees Ali Sheedy's character, the punk, kind of like dolled up and everything, or whatever she is, the goth chick, right? That was actually pretty good. And I think you see, there it goes right there. I just heard the boom, and I hate that. That's got to stop.
Oh, that was Doku dropping out. He'll probably be back. So you'll
I
hear it one
can't
more time.
stand that sound at all. It's irritating as shit, and it needs to stop. There's got to be a function in Discord where you cannot hear it whatsoever.
I think
Because
so, but I don't know. I'm used
it's
to it
very
at this point.
distracting and it's very irritating as fuck. I hate that sound. I think there were like 3 or 4 songs on the Breakfast Club soundtrack. So we're gonna start with the '80s, and you smart mouthed about the Breakfast Club. They're just better than that song by Simple Minds. I think it's just so damn generic.
Well, no,
No,
and
and that's just me.
if you want to talk about like 80s music, what was with the dudes all looking like chicks? I mean, don't get me wrong. I like Bon Jovi as much as the next guy, but damn, dude, you
The
look like a chick.
higher the hair, closer to God. That was the theory, apparently.
Yeah, like what the hell? And then you go back and watch the first Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I dare you. Look at the hair in
What
that
about
movie.
they actually look more clean cut and presentable than the little ponces and poofs that run around these days.
I'm just
I mean,
saying,
I got to
like,
tell you, if I was a girl between the age of 15 and 25 and to times, I would be a lesbian because I would never want to be with any of the guys in this current generation. They sound like poofs and they look like morons.
yeah, then again, we're getting old, so we don't get it,
What's this
right?
we shit? My point is, I have the capability of looking back and saying, uh, No, we did not. Every generation thinks that their stuff don't stink when it comes to fashion. I can safely look back and say, God, we look stupid. I mean, we really genuinely did back in the 80s on a certain level look stupid. But I think in comparison to, you got to remember the clothes that we have now, we didn't have back then. A lot of material is not available, so it was more au naturel. I mean, if you really want to look at stupid people, go between the 1960s and the 1970s. I mean, the 1950s, 1930s, 40s, 50s, people looked good. Men looked like men, women looked like women, and were appreciative of it. And then in the 60s with the hippie generation, they just looked gross. They looked unkempt. They looked like walking garbage piles. 70s weren't much better. They took like the complete 180. It was all browns and earth tones, like they had no sense of fashion. Then in the 1980s, we kind of went, I don't know if there's anything between 180 and 360, but about halfway of that, we went looking like, I guess maybe we pulled a reverse 180 and we went to the opposite direction where we didn't know how to tone it down. And then the 90s was early 90s was just a little funny, but then it got earth tones again. And then over the years recently, within the 2000s, people finally figured out how to have a modicum of balance, you know? I mean, sure, a lot of people wear black, but they've also been able to incorporate colors with, you know, they would use black as a basic scheme, then they would incorporate colors to it. You see a lot of people, if you go to different parts of the country, wear clothes that you look at them and say, yeah, those are normal clothes, meaning they're specifically fashionable, but they don't look outlandish and stupid. I think a lot of people have gone the t-shirt and jeans route as opposed to dressing for the occasion, which is kind of disappointing, but look better than what they were doing in the 60s and 70s, I can tell you that. I mean, thank God bell-bottoms went fucking wait, bye-bye.
Yeah, well, you did have in the early 90s, and, like, I remember as a kid wearing this shit, the parachute pants, like MC Hammer or whatever, so, like, the late 80s, early 90s.
Dude, do you remember the, what was it, the zebra-striped clothes that were, like, sports team colored?
No, I don't.
Oh my God, dude, you should look those up and show them on screen. That was the shit. I mean, that was the epitome of, ever want to know what the 90s, early 90s were, watch Vanilla Ice's Cool as Ice movie. That was like the epitome of early 90s. That's how bad it was. And then I think and then on the opposite side was the grunge movement where you look like a freaking reject lumberjack. And then somewhere along the way, we figured out how not to dress like dumbasses.
Oh, I know. Like, so I was in high school. My graduation year was 03. So, right around 2000 or whatever, I grew my hair out. I did the fucking cut, like the undercut thing, and then had my hair long. And I dyed
my God,
it
you had a mullet.
Red, like an idiot. I dyed it blood red. And then in about a week, it turned to pink. And I was cussing myself out.
Now, was the pink color was the red color not long lasting, or was it one of those, because, you can do dye coloring, you can not have permanent color.
I don't know. It was supposed to be permanent, blood red, but as you showered, and believe it or not, even though I dressed all fucking punk or whatever, like a douchebag, I did shower, so it washed out.
Dude, it's okay. Here in the Midwest, everybody was going like potato with the, achy breaky heart fashion of Billy Ray Cyrus, and I was like, and I'm a guy still wearing a Metallica t-shirt with jeans, looking at these people like, you guys are fucking retarded, and yet I'm the one technically standing out. But and then the thing was, as time has gone on, we all end up looking like, you should pull up you should see if you can pull up. Are you able to pull up instead of having, because I'm watching the stream from YouTube, it just shows your logo. Are you actually able to pull up anything off the internet and show stuff like screen share?
Yeah, just a second. What do you want me to look up?
Screen share what Biff looked like, old Biff looked like from Back to the Future, where he's wearing that green jogging outfit. Because that's kind of where we've all gone in, you know, and everybody's thinking in 2015 we're going to have flying cars and all this other crap. But the truth of the matter is we all started ending up looking like Biff from Back to the Future with like sports outfits and all this other crap.
It's not popping up.
It's fine. Just go ahead. Yeah, just keep the. If anybody remembers what Biff from Back to the Future looked like at the end of the movie where he saw the flying DeLorean, the green tracksuit from Adidas, that's pretty much where most everyday fashion has gone. Most people are wearing that kind of stuff as opposed to actual decent clothes. I mean, basically that's what you're looking at when it gets there. That's pretty much what I'm talking about. We're to that point in fashion. That's what we wear. Everybody's thinking we're having the crazy shit in the flying cars. No, we've gone to Biff from Back to the Future fashion. And soccer moms especially. I mean, although some, women wearing spandex on a certain level is not a bad thing. But I was reading in the chat, if you can pull it up, feel free, but you don't have to. So Ain't Jack says, I want suit and ties as everyday wear for men to come back myself. I remember days when all men went to work in a full suit and tie and hat, from janitor up to executives. And on a certain level, he's correct.
Well, no, and...
it's...
Yeah, I'm going to close out of that on OBS. It's showing my thing.
Stuff that will be irrelevant when we're done. So yeah, no, it's like that. I mean, you look at something like the Wonder Years, okay? I know that show is from the late 80s, early 90s, but it takes place in like the mid 60s and whatnot. If you look at how Jack, and I believe his wife's name was actually Karen. Pardon the modern,
fucking Karen.
I think that was actually Jack. What was Fred Savage's character's name? So I'm going to look that up. I'm making a point. Oh, Karen was the daughter, I believe. Which looking back, she was such a Karen.
Well, if you're talking about the Wonder Years, I thought it was Winnie was the neighbor.
Oh girl. No, stop. That's not even what I'm talking about. Your mind's going way off. Okay. So Finn Arnold is the main character. His father is John, goes by the name Jack, was Nora. So if you look at Jack and Nora, they exemplified what dressing decently was like, as did a lot of other people. Jack was the average blue collar dude who went to, he worked for Norcom, a military defense corporation. And he went from blue collar, which was basically you'd wear normally just like a work uniform, or you would wear like in the 80s you would wear khakis and polos or whatever. Basically what some people wear now at Burger King and all, or Wendy's and all that shit. A shirt and a polo and whatever. Polo shirts and jeans or khakis, right? I happen to know at the store that I help run for the company that I work for, the people that are very low tier, they wear nice faux silk shirts, and they wear black khakis, and they wear basic tennis shoes, that are usually dark colored, so they look nice. Well, that was kind of the everything back then. And Norma was her name. Norma would wear a basic skirt. She would, or blouse, or she would wear or she would wear like a woman's, dress suit or something like that. People had a sense of respect for themselves. I mean, even Wayne, Kevin's jackass older brother, dressed decently. It was the daughter, Karen, who, being a baby boomer and a Karen, I mean, make whatever common, LOLs you want about that now, she dressed like a goddamn hippie. And they looked like they didn't know how to take care of themselves. And they were just god awful and ugly. You'd call them hipsters these days. But that's what they were back then, hippies. That's what hipsters are trying to be, the hippies. And while you would make fun of the average kid in the 80s, because we're starting to stick to the 80s, if you made fun of somebody who dressed like a nerd, or you had, with the, like James Rolfe saying, your video game nerd character, that's where that nerd stereotype comes. That's where he gets the nerd stereotype come from, with the pocket protector and all this other shit. They still dress decently. And it was really only the punks or the metalheads that dressed out of sorts. Most everybody else, which you would call them preps, they dressed decently. But in the 1980s, I can say from my perspective, even if we wore a Metallica t-shirt and jeans, we still dressed better than the posers, the people that were they're trying to be goth or emo or whatever the hell they want. They didn't know how to do anything. They didn't look like they gave a crap about themselves. And this is something American society has lost, how to look presentable and respectable. And then people wonder why people have attitude problems about everything. I mean, it's like, well, you look like this. I wouldn't want to hire you either. But in the 1980s, I'm not saying was the height of fashion, because, God, we had some gut. Anybody wants to know how bad fashion can get, go watch any pop video from the 1980s. I mean, hell, you could watch Madonna and most of her videos from the early 80s, and she looks like a hooker these days. And then you would watch some where she looks trashy. But then you would watch something like her Material Girl version, which is supposed to replicate Marilyn Monroe, and she looks classy. So we had a bevy of people that had style, and you could always tell who was in what group with what style. But by the 90s, it had basically gone away, and in the 2000s, we've kind of semi-de-evolved and evolved at the same time. And that, and nowadays, it's like, pick a lane. I mean, there are people who appreciate the 1950s and they love that style, and God bless them. But, like I said, we were trying to do this, we were trying to do that. We really ended up looking like Biff for the most part from Back to the Future with the exercise outfits. And I think that Breakfast Club itself is, and if anybody, a kid nowadays were to watch that and make fun of those, well, that's how we dressed, and that was kind of like what each stereotype dressed like.
Okay, I pulled up 80s fashion. It's up on the screen. And
God, it was awful.
God, what are those colors clashing? And I'm not gay. Usually, you'll never hear me say that.
That was kind of the thing that I was making a point, is that, and that's all women's fashion, by the way, doofus. But those were the color schemes. I mean, if you look at actually the way Cyndi Lauper dressed, and you looked at like exercise outfits, how Madonna dressed, and you looked at women's and the business suits back in the day, where women had the puffy shoulders and all this other shit. Yeah, that's pretty much how we dressed for the most part. And it wasn't, honestly, until the I would say 1988 that people really started trying to figure stuff out. It was really the early and mid 90s that was fucking something else.
Okay, you see what my cursor's hanging over, though? Those are men. And what is that orange thing?
I want to see that, because I'm going to call bullshit on that. I want to see that. Did you just put into DuckDuckGo just 1980s fashion?
Yep, that's all I did. Yeah.
1980s fashion. God, I gotta see this shit for myself.
Yeah, that orange thing is atrocious.
I love this 1980s in Western fashion. Give me a fucking break. Oh my god. Okay, so I'm on the screen now, and if you look at some of these, they're actually quite because we had God, the best way to see stuff is try to hunt down old magazines.
Oh no,
But if
I'm
you look up, and
thinking
like I said,
the dude on the left, right, with the white overshirt and the black and white
that's
undershirt.
actually true.
I will
That's
wear
actually
that
true.
like today. Like I would totally rock that.
That's
shit.
actually true because that is very reminiscent of bands such as the Fix, any '80s pop band like that. But that guy on my right, where he's wearing the orange with the yellow and the blue, that's fucking totally 2000s. That's fucking not even real.
And
The
that's
one in the middle
ugly as
is
fuck.
the one in the middle that's questionable because there were similar patterns to that, but they didn't have that. So I'm calling the one in the orange with the blue bullshit. I'm calling bullshit. That's a 2000s interpretation of what they thought the 1980s were.
And Doku, are you here? We're talking 80s fashion.
In 1980s in general, just happened to go from the Breakfast Club to fashion and call them bullshit on stuff.
All right, though that's stylish. Dude looks like fucking MC Hammer. He's just without a parachute.
That was early. That was late 80s, early 90s fashion. By the way, that wasn't every day. That was like if you were urban.
And just to answer your question, no, I'm here. I was just muted while the two of you guys talked because I valid points on both sides. So
look, fence sitter, pick a side.
Yeah, you want to be
on the right when it comes
side.
to non-pol. It comes my side. When it comes to non-politics, you do not have the capability of being a fence sitter.
What side do you really want me to pick on this one, though? Like
your own side, if nothing else.
Dude, I am buying that dress for my wife. That's awesome.
How do you pick a? Oh, first off, how do you pick a side when it comes to 80s fashion? Like, bro, it was tacky, it was cheesy, it was supposed to be boisterous and in your face, and it achieved what it was supposed to achieve.
Are you watching the stream, Doku? Do you see what's up on the screen? Like, this is a Pac-Man dress. I'm totally buying this for my wife.
That's not 80s fashion. That is what millennials think 1980s fashion
I don't
is.
care. I just want my wife to wear that for about 2 minutes. You know, long enough for me to take it off.
Why? Is that how long it's going to take you to get it on? You get into the age you can only go 2 minutes or less?
No. I take the clothes off. She doesn't want to fuck her clothes up, so...
I thought that's how long you could last, which was basically the time it takes to bake, to nuke a burrito.
No. Actually, you don't want to know. I'll just put it that way. But no, that dress is awesome. Pac-Man is great, and totally buying that for my wife.
You know what? If you think the Pac-Man dress is great, then you need the fucking R2-D2 fucking one-piece swimsuit. And if anybody disagrees, then fuck you.
It's just that it's just the millennials thinking that this is what 80s fashion was, and it's like, no, we didn't. See, if you actually, it's not what it was. I mean, if you actually hunt down 80s websites or you find old catalogs like JCPenney's or Sears, I mean, fucking good luck, but there's somebody that has that out there. If you actually see what the clothes were in those type of things, like JCPenney catalogs, Sears catalogs, Walmart catalogs, when we actually had to buy big thicks of, big books of thin paper, which, catalogs, that's actually what fashion was. Not now the average person, at least in the Midwest, did not wear all that fancy fashion. We really were just t-shirt and jeans people. And that was really left over from the 1950s, where the greasers wore t-shirt and jeans. That became every average day pack sexual.
Well,
Apparently,
let's be
yeah.
blunt.
Did Matt just say he is pack sexual?
Dave, let's be honest. Outside of like Hollywood and fucking red carpet and shit that was supposed to be like flamboyant and bombastic for the sake of drawing attention.
Flammable.
80s fashion, yes. Oh god, so much hairspray. But 80s fashion was you might get some attention wearing a leather fucking jacket.
Well,
80s fashion was just basic as fuck. Like there was no different than what fashion might be considered today. It's just you're wearing different type of a different type of clothing. It has not changed. If you really want to talk about fucking fashion from the 80s to the 90s to the fucking early 2000s all the way up until now, it's just shit to draw attention to yourself. No one's gonna walk around like an everyday person wearing some of the shit that you're gonna see in these fucking catalogs.
Well, what I think we were actually pointing out is people used to have where they were respectable. That was what we were at.
well, no, and what I have up on the screen, that seems to be probably, maybe the girls are trying to show off a little bit, showing a little bit of their belly or whatnot, but they're wearing what, shorts and fucking jeans and tennis shoes and shit. That's probably the majority of what fashion was in the 80s,
All right, so I'll make a statement. If you were going to be fashionable back in the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s, it didn't mean you need to dress like a fucking SLUT, because I'm not trying to get your channel banned here, Dodge. You didn't
I
need
don't
to
think
draw
that word
attention to
technically
your...
qualifies. You weren't dressing like Madonna, who dressed like a tart.
Yeah, you didn't need to draw attention to yourself because you're wearing less clothing. It was supposed to be fashionable. There's a difference between being fashionable and just trying to draw attention to yourself because, well, maybe you don't know how to walk a certain way, or maybe you don't know how to sway your hips. No, you have to draw attention to yourself because, look at me, I'm not wearing clothing. Like, get out of here. Like, stop. Where are your parents? There is a difference. There is a difference between being fashionable and just dressing like a tart. Get out of here with that. Stop it.
The only people that were dressing like tarts were the women or the homos.
That's why I stand by my point.
YouTube, you can bite me because that's the appropriate term that was used in the 1980s.
But am I wrong? Like,
Oh.
if you need to dress like a tart because that's the best thing that you can do to draw attention to yourself, then no, bug off, go away, stop. If you really had a sense of fashion, if you had a sense of how to carry yourself as a person, it doesn't matter.
Respect for oneself, in other words.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you're dressed skimpy or if you're dressed conservatively. But if you know how to dress with class, if you can walk with class, if you can command a presence, it doesn't matter how you're dressed. It really doesn't. I mean, hell, look at a lot of the red carpet people from back in the 60s and 70s. They weren't necessarily dressed skimpy, but it's not even the fact that they were even arguably well-dressed. I mean, it still might look tacky from time to time, but it's how they carried themselves. It still commanded some type of presence. And that's where the difference between, some people think like, oh, you have fashion. I don't need to be wearing, obviously I'm a guy. You couldn't tell from my voice. But I don't need a fancy fucking beard. I don't need a coat that looks like it was created from a frickin' quilt to command presence. I could just be wearing a black suit, a black tie, and a white t-shirt. If I know how to present myself well, I don't need anything flashy or flamboyant. But I can still command a fucking presence.
That's the problem, Doku. Nobody knows how to do that, especially these days, compared to the 1980s.
Okay. I pulled up 80s TV shows. That's where I want to go next. Yeah, Married with Children. Okay, that started in the 80s. But, why the
that did start in the 80s, but that was more of a very 90s show.
Yeah, and the one that I'm shocked at is I see either Mary-Kate or Ashley Olsen up on my screen, and I see Jesse. Why? That was TGIF.
Full House started in 1988, I think.
I mean, I was born in 84. I remember the 90s better than the 80s. That was 90s.
Well, but you got to remember, when did it start? It started September 22nd, 1987. And it ran all the way till May 23rd, 1995. Technically, like Married with Children, it's a product of the late 80s. Even though it would epitomize on a certain level because if you really think about it, Full House and Married with Children are the dynamic opposites of what a family structure is or was viewed at in the early 1990s. I mean, you could consider Full House the Brady Bunch of the 90s just as much as you could actually say that Married with Children was more Simpsons than The Simpsons of the 90s. Because The Simpsons, you got to remember, and we're not going on a diatribe here, I'm just pointing out that The Simpsons was very anti-establishment at the time, and Married with Children took it to the nth degree.
Yeah, Married with Children seemed to be
they started in the 80s.
The thing with Married with Children is I think Al was a reincarnation of the Archie Bunker. You know what I mean?
No.
Kind of the same type of character.
And I would disagree simply for the fact that Archie Bunker himself was a product of his generation, but Al was very non-PC. Archie Bunker wasn't necessarily non-politically correct because when Archie Bunker came out, political correctness did not exist. Political correctness in all of its fashions comes from the 1990s. So TV show-wise, they're in the same vein of being anti-authoritarianism and undisciplined, but Archie Bunker himself was very straight-laced, and he is a product of his time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think we all need to have a little Archie Bunker, a little Al Bundy in us. Hell, we all need to have a little, and don't make any fucking jokes about this, I'm serious. In regards to the Cosby Show, we all need a little Dr. Cosby. You know, being the good dad, the family man, and being able to have a laugh and, kind of troll your kids before it was trolling. You know what I'm saying? We all need to have a little each of those TV characters in us to, because sometimes they're there to say, hey, life may seem tough, but you don't have to take it seriously, because a parent-child relationship is never what you think it is. And in the 80s, most parents that were parents in the 80s were pretty darn good about stuff, but they're very quote-unquote conservative, not in the political sense, but in the regulatory strict rules sense. Eat your greens, go to bed early, brush your teeth, and get A's in school kind of stuff. And more functional as opposed to dysfunctional. Yeah. So that's what we needed out of our TV parents. The 80s gave us, the 1980s TV gave us a wide variety of that.
Well, in that vein, Growing Pains. Now, Growing Pains is a good show, but that was an abnormal family. You're talking about a psychiatrist, so high wage.
I think they were too. I think he put stuff in their. I think he put stuff in their cereal every day. To be honest,
right? I mean,
they were too darn happy.
Yeah. I don't know. Did you watch Growing Pains, Doku?
No, I never did. I'll just tell you guys right now, I was never big into TV in the same sense that you guys are. I,
A lot less TV in the 1980s than people think I did.
Well, another 80s show that's not popping up here. Chips, California Highway Patrol.
It's 1970s. That's why.
70s and 80s. I was watching reruns in the 90s, but I also watched Gilligan's Island and the Munsters, so I
See,
was a
those were
little
all.
abnormal.
That's why you would never find them on 80s TV shows, genius, because they're from the 60s and 70s.
Fuck you. Don't act all high fucking and mighty and shit.
Hey, you blame Duck Duck Go. You put in 80s TV shows. Of course, you're not going to find stuff from the 70s. Oh,
Asshole. No, I'm kidding. What about 80s movies? Doku, you're a little more versed in movies. So, like, Young Guns was 88. You had, what, Top Gun, Days of Thunder. Those were 80s movies, right?
so what premise do you want to go with first? Because if we're going with the premise of fashion and style, there's a distinct difference. But
talking the 80s in general, we had just diverged to style because of something else.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm still going to go down that rabbit hole a little bit. When it comes to the 80s, 90s, I'll even toss the 60s and 70s in there with obvious exceptions. You didn't need to be flamboyant or look at me for a reason. Entertainment of more recent memory, they try to cover up crap storytelling and garbage plot lines just by making things more bombastic. Throw more explosions in there, throw more CGI effects. Let's make everything more visually appealing. That's just an excuse to cover up a crap story.
So you're talking Power Rangers.
Even Power Rangers, for as cheesy as it was, at least there was still a story to it. And I would say Power Rangers is probably when you started to notice that things became a lot more visually appealing. Nobody was paying attention to the plot line. No one was paying attention to the characters. As long as things are, shiny colors, it would sell. And that's when you started to see, like, how things just became really, really, really bad. Like, really terrible.
Okay.
It wasn't like that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, or even the early 90s, early 2000s.
They were trying to have TV shows and movies that were just meant to entertain and not be finish watching season 5 of The Flash, and a lot of outfit designs are not overbearing, but it's heavy drama as to where you would think that the 1990s version of The Flash, they had a problem, they solved it within the time regulated, and then maybe they would refer it in another episode, but they still tried to keep it simple. It's become too complex is what I'm saying about a lot of things. They tried to keep it simple back in the day, not because they felt people were stupid. It's just kind of like, we're trying to get a product out there. We're trying to let people have some fun and not overheat their brains.
Well, I would actually make the argument that we have a very strange dichotomy where the appeal has shifted to one extreme or the other, where it's either something needs to be very flashy and you're not watching it for the story, you're watching it for the visuals.
Yeah.
And on the other end, you're not watching it for the visuals, you're watching it for the story. But they're two extremes. The two do not exist. God, if I can talk.
Do you think that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s especially, people didn't have attention spans that go faster than the flapping of a hummingbird's wing as opposed to these days?
Oh, I don't.
That made a difference.
No, I still think it was the same thing where it was either visuals or story, but it's just they've diverged so much that it's either it's only visuals or it's only story. And it's become rare that you actually see something that's decently well done that actually encompasses both.
Well, what I was going to bring up was the fact that the 80s didn't seem to take itself too seriously. I mean, just look at the horror
not even
movies.
in action movies.
Yeah, look at the horror and the action movies that came out, right? I think the first Lethal Weapon was 89, wasn't it? And even that movie didn't really take itself very seriously.
Dude, you are such a millennial. It was 87. Get out of here.
87, okay? I'm off by 3 years. Isn't there a margin of error here?
Oh.
No margin of error for you.
No, but speaking of the 1980s, you bring up something quite good, is that we did account for the margin of error and we didn't take shit too seriously. I think one of the things that the 1980s did was, at least movie-wise, was we really gave a lot of variety, and we actually tried to actually put a lot of effort into it with the technology that we had. And people did account for a margin of error of realizing, oh, this may look, down the road, it's not going to look as impressive, but, will it serve the story? As to comparison today, everything has to be so goddamn nitpicky, properly detailed.
Well,
and I think that the technology has gone too much. They take too much, they don't know how to be creative, and they think that on an old school level, not that they are uncreative, it's just they depend way too much upon modern technology, and sometimes their critical thinking skills of how to get out of a problem, quote unquote, a margin of error is not there.
Oh, I'll make an example here. I'm going to use the first Terminator movie. Was there that one scene where the Arnold shows up after going through time travel? It's like, okay, yeah, obviously sex sells. The same way even in Troll 2, yeah, sex sells. You're obviously going to go with visuals, and even if it's not something sexual, it might be, it might be something flashy. It might be something that catches your attention. But there was still a story there where, yeah, your attention is caught because it's, visually something that catches your attention. Whether it's special effects, or whether it's a big muscle-bound dude running around like, ha-ha, he's half naked. Oh, the ladies love that. Or for the guys, oh yeah, she's wearing the booty shorts and the skimpy outfit. Yeah, it catches your attention, but that's not the whole point. The point is that there's still a fucking story. Versus if you look at a lot of the stuff that's thrown out now, there's no real story. There's no substance behind it. That's the word I'm looking for. There's no substance.
I'm going to read something that Aunt Jack has put in the main chat here, and I think that's very valuable to read this. Aunt Jack says, the writers are trying to pretend they are smarter than what they are these days. Additionally, they are not creative because they are not hired for creativities. They are hired for political ideology. There is a truth to that. However, the caveat is, in the 1980s, there were people, Hollywood's always been red. Let's not say anything otherwise. But when they told a story that had political ideologies behind it, they were doing it in a way that served the story. Because you could have political thrillers, you could have action movies, you could have comedies, you could have a mix of things. And the serious movies that had political ideologies as the basis of the stories. They were, they weren't talking about real world politics. They were talking about art imitates life, but yet it needs to serve the story. And that's something that we've lost since the 1980s, and something we've lost since the 1990s is stories, regardless of what they be, are not serving the story, to push the movie forward.
Oh, again, that's kind of the whole point I'm getting at, is even in the 80s you could still have sexualization, because yeah, sex sells. Hate to break it to you guys, sex does indeed sell. It catches your attention.
It's a good thing you don't see what's on my wallpaper on my laptop or desktop then. Anyway.
But yeah, again, sex sells the same way that Michael Bay movies that have just explosions and it's just crazy crap happening and shit's going off, and yeah, sensationalism, sex, all of that sells because it catches your attention. The point that I'm trying to make is once you get past that gimmick of explosions, fancy CGI effects, overly sexualized characters, yeah, all of that catches your attention. But if there's nothing behind the story that actually really carries the narrative, if the story itself is just crap, yeah, all of that sells, but it doesn't make for a good story. And that's where I start to draw an issue with a lot of stuff that, I mean, even with the Marvel Cinematic Universe as it's come to its close, the gimmick is cheap. The gimmick is done. It's overplayed. Once the story is done, once the narrative is done, why the fuck do I care? Am I gonna go back and rewatch a fucking Transformers movie just to watch explosions? I'm not. Am I gonna go back and rewatch it? You could take the hottest, objectively most attractive actress in Hollywood right now, throw her in the skimpiest costume you can find. I'm not gonna go watch her movie simply because hot actress in skimpy outfit. No, dude, that's what Pornhub exists for. I'm not gonna watch her movie because of that. That you still have to have some kind of compelling story, and that's where Hollywood is really falling flat. They're trying to give these selling points where, oh look, here's a hot piece of ass, they're half naked, and here's some fancy explosions, and here's some great CGI work, but our story is contrived and bullshit. I'm not gonna watch that shit, dude. That's a waste of fucking time. Am I wrong?
Oh shit. Sorry, I stepped away while you guys were talking and then Doku dropped out. My bad. Hello? Looks like we have technical difficulties with the people in here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Alright. So we're back. Yeah, no, I was sitting here listening to you guys and trying to figure out what I'm going to eat for dinner since my wife is gone and I have to cook. Yay. But, what do you think about, I don't know, Tim Burton's Batman? Because that was 80s, so that counts.
I have mixed feelings, to be honest. Stylistically, love it or hate it, it had a very distinctive style. I can't knock it. But that doesn't necessarily make it good. I still think it was very campy, very cheesy. But for that time period and for what it was, the campiness, the cheesiness, that actually kind of worked in its favor.
Yeah, and it's the first movie
I don't really
actually
have anything to
remember.
say about it. I'm just sick and tired of everybody thinking that the Christopher Nolan Batman movies are the best, and they can kiss my ass. They're bullshit. They're too damn. They're overhyped. I don't think they're bad. I just think that they're overhyped, and I think people delve too much into keeping stuff complex instead of actually knowing how to shut their brains down and just enjoy something.
Well, and that's exactly why I say, like, the campiness and cheesiness that the Tim Burton Batman film brought
Campy and it ain't
to the
cheesy.
table.
I'm gonna squash this right now, Doku. I love you, man, but it's not campy and it's not cheesy. That's the 1960s. 1989 Batman movie was the Kickstarter for basically all your dark and complex storytelling, which the 1990s butchered, and that everybody takes for advantage and granted of these days. It's not campy and it's not cheesy.
No, I'm still gonna say it's campy and it's cheesy, but the reason, and I can see why you would have that opinion. I still say it's campy and it's cheesy, but the reason that it's good is because it's campy and cheesy, but it's done right.
You know what the terms campy and cheesy actually mean?
No, I do.
Okay.
The reason I'm saying that I still think they're campy and cheesy is they are campy and fucking cheesy, but they do it in a way that it doesn't feel like it. So when you watch it, it still has, rather than coming off as being campy and cheesy, it comes off as having a certain kind of flavor. It has a certain type of, it goes beyond that, where it has a tone to it, where you can look past that aspect and it's actually strangely endearing, like most Tim Burton films. Like, it actually works, not just well, it actually sets it apart from everything else, to where you're never going to get that same type of feeling from a movie the way that it manages to pull it off in such a way that it's so incredibly well done that it takes on its own feeling. It has its own persona. It has personality to it. And that's how you're supposed to do it. Granted, it's a real hit or miss thing. It doesn't happen very often. But they managed to do it so incredibly fucking well that if somebody could ever recreate it, I will eat my own hat, because I don't think you can.
Okay, you and I must have different terms of what camp means, because camp is an aesthetic style and sensibility that regards something as appealing because of its bad taste and ironic value. That is not Batman 1989 at all. Now, in the long run, that may be Tim Burton, but that's a Tim Burton thing. He really does not know how to flex. There are many directors out there that do know how to flex, and they can use their own style, and they can also incorporate others as well as mimic other directors' style. Oh, camp.
Okay, so
that's why people say the 1960s Batman is camp, which is coincided with cheesy, because it is in bad taste and it does have ironic value. It is not self-aware. And that's because in the 1960s, Batman was basically, everybody knows, you guys all know Andy Warhol, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's what the Batman 1960s was. It was the beginning of the pop art trend, which was created by, a lot of people would say, and I mostly agree, Andy Warhol. As opposed to the Batman 1989, the aesthetic value is very in taste with the times, and it is self-aware. And as you move on and progress, it is not only a reflection of the 1980s and its time when superhero movies were not popular, as opposed to the, in comparison, not opposed, in comparison to the Nolan trilogy, which is also a product of its time, and it is aware that it reflects, I wouldn't say societal values, but what American society, movie-going society, expects as a whole for a movie. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Lord of the Rings was already all done by then. So there's a lot of people that were like, we've got to do what the Lord of the Rings does. And then in the 90s, it was camp. It was very 90s camp because they tried to mimic the dark aesthetic of what the first, I would easily say, the two Burton Keaton Batman movies were. They were not self-aware. They were in bad taste with massive ironic value, specifically because they lacked self-awareness. That is what camp is to a large majority of people, and why you will never hear in most comic book, Comic-Con circles, yeah, that Tim Burton Batman movie is full of camp and cheese. We're like, no. That's why we say the 1960s is, because it's of its time, and every Batman movie is of its time. I would even go so far as to say that for much as I like the Wonder Woman movie, the Aquawoman, or the Aquaman, Aquawoman, that would have been a good movie. Woo! Those are campy, but they're also self-aware that they are really trying to stay close to the comic book version of themselves. They're not trying to do something. Now, Zack Snyder was. That was his. That's him. He doesn't, again, like Burton on a certain level, does not know how to take a break from having his own style, which is why many people will argue over the Superman Man of Steel movie as opposed, that's for another topic, but that's camp on a certain level. And that is in bad taste because it does not know how to flex. It does not know how to bend. And that version of Batman with Ben Affleck takes itself too damn seriously. That's why I'm defending my position, saying
this is
89
kind of the point.
Camp.
And so this is kind of the point that I want to go that I was trying to get at. Just because I say something might be campy or cheesy, that actually doesn't make it a bad thing. When done right, it could actually be a really good thing. And that's why I actually do enjoy movies that embrace that type of style, because when done right, and like you said, a movie not taking itself too seriously and actually embracing that aspect of things, especially in the superhero genre, could actually be something that really makes it stand out and it makes it fun. It's not super serious, it's not super dark, it's a superhero film, and is it off the wall? Yes. Is it playing off things that have already been done and doing it in a ridiculous way? Probably. Does it have those moments where you go, oh, really? Yes, but it makes you laugh. There is a right way to do things, and there is a wrong way to do things. Modern day superhero films, especially with the advent of the MCU, they do take themselves really fucking seriously. And you don't get that same type of enjoyment as you would get from, say, a Tim Burton Batman film. It's a completely different style, but there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. So when I say campy and cheesy, it's not a bad thing. It's actually, I'm actually giving them praise for doing that, because Tim Burton's, especially with the Batman films, he manages to do it right. And it gives you that kind of, it's like watching a cartoon when you were a kid and loving it, and then going back and watching it as an adult and being like, wow, this is bad. But I still fucking love it. And it still holds up to the test of time, even despite the fact that you're 30 years old instead of being 8 years old. That is the sign of someone who knows what they're doing, and they did it right, and they did it well. And that's what I actually love about the Tim Burton films, when it comes to Batman because, yes, I'll still say they're campy and I'll still say they're cheesy. And it's subjective, I'll give you that. But it's done so incredibly well that it holds up and it's still fun and it's still enjoyable. And it really doesn't fucking matter if you think they're campy and cheesy or if you think they aren't. Because they're just good, fun films.
Being postmodernism. That's
Well,
the thing. Camp itself is the opposite of modernism. Batman 1989 is considered modernism because it's trying to root itself within a real world and not look flashy.
Oh, I'm viewing them from. I'm not viewing them from the time that they were produced now. I'm viewing them from the time that, as we're looking back, were they
still not?
Yes.
They're still not
yes,
camping.
They were.
No, they really weren't. They were set in a real world aesthetic. This particular brand of aristocratic and a moral aestheticism might be considered modern camp. It was still set in a realistic world. It didn't know it was a comic book. It was trying to be basically this guy, his parents died. He went off a little bit off his rocker, but instead of becoming a bad guy or, delving into psychosis, he dressed up like a bat. And of course, everybody's going to think he's nuts. You look at the Joker in that movie, he's the one that's camp because he knows he's out of his element. He knows he's got the flair. He knows he's got the John Waters fashion going on, and he loves it. The Joker is camp. He enjoys every ounce of it. But the Batman movie itself is a postmodernism or a modernism of the time type film with a splash of camp because of the Nicholson's Joker. If you were to say, if people say that,
I'll give you.
If you say that, I'm just making an example. Not that I would ever tell you to change your opinion. Say if you say that to people, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's totally camp. I get it." And they're more than likely to say, "You know what? I get what you're saying when you say there's what you're saying by saying, hey, I see a camp value, even though it's technically not camp, because there's just nothing wrong with having camp aesthetics in a movie, especially one that's supposed to be set in real world settings like that movie was. It really wasn't only until we got to Joel Schumacher, who passed away, sorry to say, that boy, did we really start getting camp. And I'm talking Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. That was pure camp because it was bad taste and it did not have any self-awareness.
Oh, what,
but the Burton movies were very realistic in tone with a splash of camp because let's be honest, the Penguin also, even though he wasn't bright, he didn't take himself too damn seriously. Yeah, he was out there.
Honestly, that's kind of the point that I'm getting at is there. And when I think of the Tim Burton films, there was a degree of camp to it, yes. But this is what I mean when I say it's done right because it has a place in the film and it provides contrast to, in my opinion, overly serious Batman that needed that kind of balance. And that's camp and cheesy done right. And
the movie itself is not camp. It has campish value. It has campish elements. So very rightfully needed. Because God forbid we ever had anything like the Nolan film back then. Nobody would know what the fuck to do.
Okay, then we're in agreement on that one because that's what I'm talking about. Is because if you took that element away from it, it would
be too dark.
It would be like trying to play The Last of Us 2. It would try
to be Ben Affleck and Daredevil serious. I mean, okay, let's establish one thing.
It wouldn't be fun.
We both agree.
Well, real quick.
Okay.
It wouldn't without that element of campiness and cheesiness that was very intentional. Like, I think we can agree on that. It was intentional, which is why it stands out so much. But you need that because otherwise the film wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be enjoyable. And it sure as hell wouldn't appeal to its target audience. It and also it would lose its personality, which is why it stands out so much, and it's why I actually love it, because it takes that and it embraces it, and I actually love that aspect of the film because it fits with a character like the Joker so well, where, like you were saying, the Joker himself is aware that, yeah, it's campy, it's cheesy, whatever. Let's run with it. Haha, let's go. By contrast, Batman's supposed to be like a dark, serious character that's supposed to make people not really feel that great about themselves.
Because you do realize that the tones and themes of the 1989 film were akin to Alan Moore's The Killing Joke and Miller's Dark Knight, and if it wasn't for the Joker, it would have really gone overboard. So I think we're both in agreement saying it is a comic book film that tries to have a realistic aesthetic with a splash of camp because the Joker is there to lighten the mood.
And that's what I mean, that like that's taking the aspect of campy and cheesy and injecting it into a film that would otherwise just be dark and depressing, and it's done right.
Yeah,
it's something that I don't think modern Hollywood could actually pull off.
Jack Nicholson could pull that role off, I believe.
No, I agree, and that's my point. That I'm not saying that being campy or cheesy or even contrite is necessarily a bad thing if you do it properly. And
when you say a movie is camp, you instantly trigger, not like SJW type shit, a person's brain goes to the negative.
Oh, and that's why I want to make a distinct point that...
Right, especially in Batman. Because people know the 1960s era.
Oh, and that's why I want to make the distinct point that just because someone might call it cheesy, someone might call it campy, someone might call it contrived. Those things aren't necessarily a bad thing when they're executed properly. And I know it does have a negative connotation to it. That doesn't necessarily make it bad as long as you have something to contrast and balance it against. So, again, I understand why you'd be like, no, it's not. It is, but it does it in a way that is self-aware, and it actually elevates the movie as opposed to bringing it down. Because, I'm sorry, dude, why is Troll 2 such a fucking fun movie? It's because it's stupid and cheesy and campy. And yes, Troll 2 is fucking campy.
Different. It was made to be fun, and that movie itself was made to earn a quick buck and not be taken seriously. Batman from 1989 had a lot of people were, if anybody ever watches the Shadow of the Bat documentary, they will hear Michael Uslan, who basically helped get this off the ground, talk about how many people took this so goddamn seriously because it was the first movie since the original Christopher Reeve Superman that people were saying, okay, let's take a chance on this, especially since the last two Supermans and Supergirl were the definition of over-the-top camp, and people were hesitant.
Oh no, and that's my point, and that's why I actually love the character of the Joker and with Jack Nicholson. It works because it's so fitting for the Joker character, where it provides you with, you have the super serious, I'm the Dark Knight, and then you have, I got a mask. I'm
Green Arrow, and I'm telling you, wear a mask.
Yeah, it's the perfect contrast, and that's why it works so well, and that's why I love it. Being campy and cheesy is not a bad thing. It's just you have to execute it right, and that's why I say I don't think that any movie could execute having the same degree of like dark foreboding and just kind of makes you feel bad, and then contrast it so well with campy cheesiness that is just so ridiculous that you can't possibly take it seriously, but yet somehow you still can. It's actually an amazingly well done balancing act, and that's actually why I love it. That's why I praise it. is because, yeah, it's stupid. The scenes with the Joker, they're stupid. They're ridiculous. They're over the top. And it's one of those things where you would never view this person as a threat until you realize they are. And you still walk away laughing. And then you contrast that to how Batman is in those movies. Again, a fine balancing act. One that is so incredibly well done that I don't think you could do it in modern day movies because everybody wants everything to be so fucking serious. And it's fun in the darkest fucking way, which I think really, really does highlight why the Joker's character is.
The movie is
both,
not just about, but the movie is not just about the Joker. Okay.
No, I know, but the reason I highlight
this movie from Tim Burton's direction was influenced by The Killing Joke. That is a very dark and serious movie. And in that book, because God, the animated version sucked. But in that book, it's very dark, it's very gritty, and the only thing that brought out any flavor to it was the Joker being over the top, because that's who the Joker is, and that's who he was at the time. This stuff with him being a serious killer and all, but it's again not campy. We're just going to have to agree to disagree. And it's probably because I'm the oldest out of all three of us, and I saw it in the theaters.
Well, it's actually the first movie
I was
being in the drive-in.
I saw it in the theater, 1989 when it came out.
Yeah,
and
so
the tone and the timbre of the entire movie
is my first.
How old were you?
Of a movie theater.
5.
Yeah,
I was 14.
What I remember of it? I don't even remember the movie from then. I remember the cup. We got plastic 32-ounce sodas from the drive-in, and it had the big bat symbol on it.
Oh, you were so lucky. You were so lucky. You had the drive-in. I actually went to Wisconsin Dells, and I saw it, and they had an intermission, and I thought the fucking film broke. And I found out what an intermission was, and I had to run back in with my snacks. And they literally did stop it at the 45-minute mark. But regardless, 1980s filmed the 1980 films from 1980 to the end of 1989. They were all well thought out. Even if they were considered B-rated movies, even if they were considered, subpar, somebody still took the time to think all this stuff out. They still had to be creative with what the budget they had, with the special effects that they could do, and with the storytelling. Movies these days, as you mentioned, Doku, too goddamn serious.
Well, no, and
in vast comparison.
Pivot here. Here's a question for the two of you, and you'll probably go back and forth with it. Did the 80s kill the horror genre with the sequel craze and the revamps? Because that's still going on.
That's a good question. I don't know. I never watched horror movies when I was a kid. I actually didn't start watching horror movies until Joe Bob Briggs started doing it on TNT. I think with sequelitis, like anything, was probably revved up in the 80s. That's for sure. But one thing that I think the Marvel Universe did for movies better than they did back in the 80s was they actually took time to plan everything out. And I think they couldn't have done that. So it's kind of like the chicken or the egg scenario, which came first. I don't think they could have done that unless we had sequelitis in the 80s showing us what not to do. Did sequelitis kill the horror genre in the 80s? I really couldn't say. I would say from the Friday the 13th perspective, because that's, just because that's my favorite genre series. I think they could have waited a couple years between each movie and actually had the storytelling reflect that. But that's just me. I couldn't tell you. I'm not a big horror movie fan.
Well, yeah.
I guess this is kind of my wheelhouse then.
Oh, go ahead, Doku. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. As someone who is horror is probably my second favorite genre. No, the the 80s didn't kill the horror genre, but it, especially with the sequelitis thing, it did definitely tell you what not to do. I can definitely stand by that. Were there a lot of failures? Were there a lot of flops that were just so ridiculously absurd that they shouldn't even be given the time of day? Yes. Yes, the 80s and the early 90s showed us exactly what you don't do if you want a successful horror franchise and you want it to last. But here's the thing you have to realize about horror. Horror is not supposed to be a franchise. But horror movies do not lend themselves well to franchises. They just don't. And if you want to make a franchise out of a horror movie, you better have a damn good idea as to what you're doing, because you're not just gonna go with uh Scream 1, Scream 2, Scream 3, Scream 4, and then suddenly this ties into Freddy versus Jason in outer space on Mars, while they're orbiting Saturn and an extra dimensional. No.
No, but the Hostel movies and the later innovation of like the Rob Zombie Michael Myers film, it recreated a way to where one story would lead into the other. You could also say that with like The Purge.
But isn't that like the chicken and the egg scenario? They only learn what to do because they've already saw what not to do.
I can agree with
Even
that, yeah.
even then though, if you're gonna go with horror, there's a few elements that you really need to take into consideration. Yeah, we can go with jump scares and yeah, supernatural or slasher or this or that. But if you want a successful horror movie, and I'm not even getting into the franchise aspect of things, if you want a successful horror movie, it needs to be something that not only, like, you can't go with gore porn. You can't go with a slasher flick. A slasher flick is a slasher flick is a slasher flick. We've seen it all before. That's not how you do a proper horror movie. That's at that point in time you might as well just call it, an action thriller. It's the same reason that people can tell me like, "Oh, Jason's a horror movie. Friday the 13th is a horror movie." No, it's not. It's a thriller. It it's a guy
Yeah, those are
chasing.
definitely thrillers.
Yeah. So there is a distinct difference between a thriller and a horror movie. A horror movie is something that's supposed to stick with you. That's supposed to be disturbing on some type of level, which is why they're incredibly difficult to do as franchises, because even like with the Saw movies, yeah, they're gory, they're creative in the way that they do their torture traps. Yeah, I'll give you that. It's the same thing with the Hostel movies. They're
The Hammer horror movies. That's
yeah,
technically a franchise.
but that's the thing with the gore porn, slasher thriller, uh, shock value movies. You can make franchises out of those, but that's not horror. You want to know what horror is? Horror is a movie where you never see any type of gore, but it's something that fucking sticks with you. It disturbs you. It's a like John Carpenter's The Thing. That's a horror movie,
What's up, guys?
and it's hey, what's up, Bear Dog?
Hey, we are live, just so you know.
I got that from the
John's
live show thing.
Oh, okay, yeah, we're talking 80s movies. We're talking horror right now. So
I know that's why I'm here.
But yeah, John Carpenter's The Thing. That is a horror movie, and it's not because of the body dysmorphia or the some of the gruesome things that happen. It's because you don't know who is who. There's not only the physical aspect of like, holy crap, that's horrific, but there's also the psychological aspect of you don't know who is who. You don't know who you can trust. You're stuck in the Antarctic. You are by yourself with only these people who you can't trust. there are multiple aspects to being a real horror movie as opposed to just being a slasher thriller. And that's where John Carpenter's The Thing really excels. So does Event Horizon, because you're by yourself, you can't trust other people, and the icing on the cake is the fact that when something bad does happen, it happens very quickly, and it's in a really horrific and gruesome manner. But it's not just you running away from a guy with a knife. That's the difference between a thriller and a horror movie.
Well, no, and when I think of the sequel problem with the 80s, I think, Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, was great. And then they started just getting more and more out there. And not even the dream sequences. I could live with that. They just made it a comedy with Freddy's one-liners. You know what I mean?
That was lack of consistency in regards to the writing.
Yeah, and then you
The
have,
character
like,
didn't stay intimidating, and Doku, I think you can vouch for this. I believe I've read many articles where Robert Englund said, I think they went a little over top. And remember, it was the 80s. People did coke.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong there. Again,
well,
a lot of people conflate horror with slasher thriller.
Well,
and
no, and it
they're
gets
not,
worse.
They're not
like,
the same.
You go from Nightmare on Elm Street, the one-liners, making a joke out of it, to the Hellraiser series, where they totally neglected that property. And I get it. A majority of the neglect came in the 90s, just to keep the property rights. I understand. But tell me, other than the first Hellraiser, did you even remember the other ones? Do you?
Never got past 3. I only saw the first 3 and everything else because it really was even after the second one, you could say that the first 2 is all you need. It's like Candyman. It's like, how many Candymans do you need? I mean, Tony Todd was wonderful in those movies as Candyman, and they had an arc in the first movie, and everything was resolved, and that was it. I mean, and Candyman was more of a horror movie than it was a slasher because you didn't see Candyman all the time. And then, but of course, sequelitis being what it is, ruined Candyman, ruined Child's Play. Even though Child's Play, here's what I liked about the movie, the originals. They had the character arc. They had the character arc of Andy growing up from a kid to an adult. So, give or take, if you think they're bad or not, at least they had that. But it just got to the point where a lot of things were they lose focus because of the big fat cash. Hellraiser was definitely one of those because hell, you could have gone the first 2 or 3 movies and that's all you needed. But that's just me.
Well, no, that's a good point. But when it comes to Child's Play, my favorite is actually the third one. I don't know why. I like the idea of military school where they swap the ammo from blanks to real ammo. I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's what I was talking about. I think the first 3 on Child's Play is where Andy goes from being a kid to a young adult, and then pretty much everything else after that with Chucky and Tiffany is just fucking garbage.
Oh, and see, that's actually a good point, and this is a problem that anytime Hollywood, and it's specifically Hollywood, tries to make a horror movie into a franchise, you can only use a gimmick so much before it becomes just it loses its umph. So, okay, yeah, you swapped out the blanks with real fucking bullets. All right, you can do that once. The same way, like, oh no, person's coming at you with a knife, or hey, he's gonna kill you in your dreams, or oh, there's zombies. You can only do it so much until it starts to lose what actually makes it scary. It stops
Flavor.
becoming scary. Not even flavor. it stops becoming scary because, well, what's the number one driving factor behind a horror movie? It's fear of the unknown. It's not even the jump scare, it's just the fact that you don't know what is going on. But once you actually know what's going on, it's not scary anymore.
Well,
There's a reason that House of a Thousand Corpses was actually rather successful and is still considered to be a horror movie, and I'm not saying I believe it is or isn't. But, the whole Dr. Satan thing, you can only do that once.
well, you notice in Devil's Rejects they didn't revisit that. So, yeah.
And that's where Rob Zombie was actually smart, because he didn't revisit it, because you can't. Because once you see Dr. Satan and you see, like, holy crap, those last especially that part where they're lowering them down in the coffins, bury me in this grave. When you see that type of stuff, yeah, that's scary because you've never seen it before. But once you've seen it once, it starts losing its impact. And that's why you can't really make a franchise out of a horror movie the same way you can do Blair Witch, and yeah, it's scary. But then
Well,
you start doing Blair Witch 2,
you
it's
have a point.
not that scary.
Blair Witch 2 Electric Boogaloo.
What was it? Paranormal Activity or whatever? The first one was good. Kate is a crazy bitch. That's what I
It
walked
was
away
okay.
from that movie. I was like, holy shit, fuck Kate, right? Kate was the original Karen. But after that, they kept, oh, her sister originally had the demon living there. Oh, shut up. Like, nobody cares.
Yeah, and they kept using the same tropes, and it's like, okay, yeah, a jump scare is good the first time around, but when you do it over and over and over again, it loses its impact, which is why it's so incredibly difficult to make a franchise out of a horror movie. Now, if you want it to be a slasher thriller, oh, you could make a franchise out of that and put zero effort into it, and it'll make a shit ton of money. But
Well,
it's
yeah,
not a horror
just
movie.
make the movie Seven a TV show. Oh wait, they did. It's Dexter.
Exactly. It.
Well,
Shoot
that's
your
why
example.
that's why I feel there's kind of a horror resurgence right now to a more elevated kind of horror movie as opposed to just this hack and slasher gore porn or whatever. I think we're kind of seeing that with films like Hereditary or The Witch or The Lighthouse or Midsummer. Those are very cerebral horror movies, but nothing really horrifying happens.
You know what movie
Kind
I
of.
like?
That's the best. That's the best part. Real quick, Dodge. Sorry. Uh, that's the best part about horror is it's not supposed to be gore porn. It's not supposed to be a slasher. Like, think about the first Alien movie. Is there some horrific shit going on? Yes. But you're stuck on a spaceship, and how often do you actually see the xenomorph in the first Alien movie?
That's the thing.
You're not supposed to see it.
I think he
They-
had like a minute and a half of total airtime or some shit.
Yeah,
That.
it's
Very
you
end.
barely ever see the xenomorph, and they do that for a reason, because it's supposed to be you're being stalked by something. You know it's there. It's very obvious it's there, but you never see it until you don't get a good look at it, I should say, until the very, very end.
That's why I didn't mind the
Right.
new Blair Witch movie, like the reboot or whatever the fuck it was. They didn't show her until the very, very end.
Well, no, and that's what I was gonna say. There's this foreign movie. It's French. It's called Catacombs, and it's the only foreign movie I actually like. I don't like having to read my movie. If I want to read, I'll read a book. You know what I mean? And I get it. Oh, you uncultured swine. You only watch American movies. Yeah, so what? Get over it.
I mean, that's what I was gonna say, but you said it already.
Some things cannot be translated into English properly without actually losing the behind the movie, which is why subtitles are offered. It's not because you're lazy or uncultured. It's just because they don't translate well. That's all there is to
You
it.
sure about that?
No, the whole
Yeah,
premise of this movie,
I am
though,
sure about that.
Okay,
is
well, calm down.
the whole premise of this movie is pretty simple. A couple of tourists go down into the catacombs illegally to explore, and they get separated. You never see what's coming after her at all. It's pretty much her with a flashlight in the Paris catacombs, which, you know, is a burial site. It's built of thousands of bones. And I think they actually filmed it down in the catacombs. So, I mean, it was a really good premise, and you never saw what was hunting her. The very end, the camera drops and goes to black or whatever.
The thing about 80s horror movies or 80s movies in general, comparison today, audiences have become more sophisticated and they're not easily tricked, is what I mean by sophisticated. They know what's coming because of the advent of VHS and DVDs. So that gives the writers and directors the challenge of how can we do this without not necessarily being unoriginal, but predictable. And that's where they really got to start thinking, what does horror genuinely mean? And that's why there's a massive difference between gore porn and all this other shit, and actual genuine horror. If you were to watch, a lot of people today, if they were to watch the Hammer horror movies, they'd be bored stupid. Well, that's their problem. If they watched the 1980s movies that were not, the slasher flicks, they might be enticed. The 90s, somewhat desolate, but the more modern stuff, it's everything circular. They're getting back to the point of realizing, this is how we get stuff to work effectively and how we can make, the technology we have work for us to actually tell the story and keep you in suspense. Suspense, it's the suspense of the feeling of suspense, of dread, of, our primal fear of, we are intimidated and scared by what's not, what we don't see, or the unknown is what drives a good horror movie. They're starting to figure that out again.
Yeah, and this is modern and it is video games, but Doku, real quick, a sidetrack. They're coming out with another Resident Evil game, this time for the PS5.
That shit looks tits money.
So, good idea, Wolfshot?
I really enjoyed Resident Evil 7. I think that it's a good direction to go in for gaming as far as I'm concerned, especially trying to keep something fresh. Like, we know what zombies are. We get it. Introducing more paranormal shit in, like werewolves and vampires and what have you, that sounds like a great idea to me.
Okay, what do you think, Doku? Because I was going from the angle of, I'm not sure. Because I know they'll release a PS4 copy. For the first 3 years, they always do both. I'm not going to upgrade for a couple years. I'm going to wait
They
for
actually
the
canceled
library.
the PS4 port. I hate
Yeah.
to say that.
Yeah, so I'm going to wait to upgrade to PS5 for a couple years and let the library, get up there. So I'm going to play it via PS4. But is it a good idea or not? I like Resident Evil, and I like the remasters they're doing. I've played them. They're good. So, I'm kind of iffy on this.
Yeah. Well, you already know that I'm a massive Resident Evil fan. That's my second favorite horror franchise. So I'm conflicted. So I'll start with this. I don't really care about them introducing new threats or new enemies. That really doesn't bug me. I really couldn't give two shits less. What I do like and why I think Resident Evil 7 was so good and so well received is because of the tone. And this is what this is what's important about doing horror and doing it properly. You could throw vampires, zombies, werewolves, you could throw aliens at me. I really don't give a shit. It's the tone of the game and the way that it's done. I don't want to play a slasher thriller. I don't want to be... In other words, I don't want to play a Resident Evil game where I get a button prompt where I can dodge. I shouldn't even be allowed to do that. I should be walking through a hallway and hear a noise and think, oh fuck, do I want to keep walking forward? Or should I backtrack? Did I miss something?
What if they give you?
Could I comment on something about the tone aspect, Doku, if you don't mind?
Yeah, go for it.
I have to say, Resident Evil 7 is the only Resident Evil game that I played that felt like Silent Hill. I'm going to say that.
No, and I don't disagree with you. The reason I actually like the original Resident Evil and also the remakes, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but they can fucking kiss my ass because they're wrong. When you have
Fuck you.
when you have a character when you're playing a certain character and you're restricted, and you, like, again, using the analogy I was using just now, when you're walking down a hallway and you hear like a conk conk on a window, or you see a shadow somewhere, and you think to yourself, did I miss something? Is there a room that I didn't see? Is there a puzzle that I didn't solve? You don't know. Do I want to keep walking forward? Oh, by the way, I can only get bit like 2 or 3 times before I die. Do I want to keep moving forward? It's that sense of apprehension. You don't need a monster. You don't need this. You don't need gore. You don't need to be running full speed, dodging this and that. No, you want a really good fucking horror story? It should be that moment where you think, crap, did I miss something? What is it that I don't understand? And then you decide, fuck, nope, I'm gonna go backtrack and see if I did miss something. And then, oh, maybe you did find something. But then you move forward and whatever was knocking on the window, well, it's not there anymore. But you still hear noises. And it's that increasing sense of paranoia, that building tension. You don't need a monster. It could just be a random crack of thunder, and it scares the piss out of you because you have no idea what's about to happen next. That's how you do horror. You don't need monsters to do that. That's where the original Resident Evil games and also original horror really, really does shine. Because bare minimum, and this is, I forget the name of the game, Among the Sleep.
That was a good game.
Yeah, but the thing is, you never see the monster. You just see shadows and you just hear noises. And you never know if you're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. You never know if you missed a puzzle. You never know if you actually even really completed the puzzle. It's just, okay, cool, keep going. Have fun. It's like, well, did I win? Did I succeed? We're not going to tell you.
Isn't this where
keep
first
going.
person's perspective would actually benefit the current upcoming generation of games and systems as opposed to third person, especially if you want to, in the horror genre of games, want to keep that suspense because you don't get to see all the way around you?
Well, what's interesting is I was watching a documentary on the Resident Evil games, and they were originally intended to be first person, but because of the lack of requirements on the PlayStation, they had to go to a third person fixed camera angle to get it to work.
Oh, and the thing is, they actually took that and did it so brilliantly because, and I remember still playing through the original Resident Evil and also our remake on GameCube. They took that fixed camera angle and they utilized it so well because you can never actually see around certain corners. And so you're like, I hear it, but I can't see it.
I hated that fucking
And
camera
Yeah, I
angle.
do too. Me personally, I did not like it. I hate fixed camera angles. I understand what you're saying, Doku, but I don't know. The first person perspective really puts your ass in the seat with horror, for me, anyways.
well, and the thing that I liked about the fixed camera, well, the tank control fixed camera angle, is because you hear a noise and you're like, oh crap, fuck me, fuck me, fuck me. I have to keep going forward. And then you go around the corner and there's nothing there, and it's just a tree branch just slapping on the side of the window, and you're like, are you fucking kidding me?
Well,
And
I
then you
get.
keep walking forward, and then you hear a window smash, and you're like, fuck, where was that? But you don't know because you can't, because you're not in a first person setting. So you're like, shit, do I backtrack and see what the hell happened, or do I keep moving forward? Like, you don't know. It builds tension, and it does it in a very, very, very subtle way.
I get that, but I have a basic complaint. You go around a corner, and suddenly backwards is forward and forward is backwards because you're just at a different camera angle. I hated
Well,
that.
and see what you're complaining about is the tank controls, which that is a valid complaint. It The tank controls are obnoxious to say the least. But it's not the camera angle that's the problem. It's just simply the controls. So that could have been done better. I will give you that. But as far as the fixed camera angle, no, that's not the problem.
So, you
I
think this new game is a good idea? I mean, look at what's coming out. All right. Last day of the year, you're gonna get Bloodlines 2, a vampire game from White Wolf. So you'll have that in the genre. Then you have the new Resident Evil coming out. Is that a launch title or is that coming out a little bit later?
Resident Evil 8 isn't going to be a launch game, I don't think.
Okay.
They did cancel their PS4 and Xbox One port. I know that. So it won't be coming for the PlayStation 4.
I bet you they'll release a digital port over later on.
It's
If not,
frustrating.
if not, Bloodlines is coming out. That's the game I'm buying anyway. I, of all places, I have a fucking actual video game store calling me the day it drops. So, I'm not going Amazon this route. I'm gonna fucking show up and buy it the day it's released. I could just show up at Best Buy, but whatever.
I mean, they're also talking about a Silent Hill 5 game that's going to be a soft reboot of the franchise. I don't know. They're supposed to show off some trailer sometime this summer. I don't fucking know. I mean, I love Silent Hill. That's probably my favorite horror franchise. So,
Okay. Other than that, there's not very many other horror games really out there anymore. I mean, you don't have. Does Nintendo have Castlevania releasing again, or no?
I
Because
mean,
I
you know,
Shit,
mean,
you better build
Konami.
a fucking DeLorean and time travel for that shit. That ain't gonna happen anytime soon.
Konami can't fucking make a fucking Silent Hill, one of their AAA IPs, happen. I mean, fuck.
that's
The thing is,
stupid. With the Switch working
after
out so well, Castlevania should have a new edition. You know what I mean? That's a.
Shadow, like,
Oh, go ahead, Wolfshot. Go for it.
no, the Shadow of the Night or whatever, or I can't remember the one where you play Alucard. That's supposed to get an HD remaster. I don't know how. It's still going to be a side scroller. I don't think they're going to take it out of side scrolling.
I think the
well,
last time Castlevania had any good games is when they did the soft reboot, the PS3 era, where they actually weren't stuck inside the castle all the time with that Metroidvania shit.
Could they do maybe a not not Doom? What am I thinking? Oh, Dante's Inferno.
No, they were supposed to several years back, but that kind of went by the wayside.
That's
Uh,
stupid. That was an interesting concept, and I played it on the PSP. I had that port, um, so I didn't play it on a big screen. But they were going more mature rating with that game. If I remember, I think I killed like a million naked fucking wenches on my way through the dungeons,
We didn't
right?
have a rating system. That was the best thing about the 1980s. We played a video game, and there it was. We didn't have a bullshit rating system.
Oh no,
Thank you,
Dante's Inferno
douchebags
is
in the
newer.
80s.
We didn't have a rating. We
Dante.
had a rating system, but my parents didn't give a shit. So
Okay,
Right, there you go.
Dante's Inferno was narrative. It was all right. It had a decent story. It was consistent at least. But what it did have was some really, really good imagery, especially if you're going for. I wouldn't call it horror, but it was disturbing to say the least. It But it was basically just a God of War knockoff. So yeah, you had what the hell? What was the third level? Lust, where Cleopatra is like throwing unbaptized babies out of her freaking tits, and
Yeah, yeah, that shit was crazy.
yeah, like for real. Like you have Cleopatra who's climbing this freaking tower trying to kill you the whole time, and she's like throwing unbaptized babies out of her tits, and there's like the lust monsters that have like the tentacles that come out of their JJ and trying to strangle you.
I only
It's just horrific things. Not necessarily scary, but just more of what the fuck.
I
Like,
only watched the anime that, or the not. I don't think it was an anime, but the animated movie that came out along with the game. I watched that.
hmm.
You know what I would do?
No,
I wish I could
real
learn
quick,
to
Dodge, because
code.
I need to tell this to Bear. To Bear. Uh, no, there are gluttons who have their hands are mouths, their mouths are mouths. They will throw up on you and or take a poop on you. And then they'll try to eat you. It
I heard the
they
game. I heard the game was pretty wild, very much in the vein of Devil May Cry.
oh yeah, it is. It is wild, and they take the concept of, hey, this is hell. Yeah, you have lust demons that are trying to quite literally eat you with their private parts, and there's gluttons that want to eat you and also are vomiting and crapping all over the place. It's They really do a good job with imagery and presenting you with the fact that yeah, you're in hell. There's no question about it.
Yeah, so I posted in this general Discord the movie that I'm talking about that I watched, the Dante's Inferno animated. It was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, no, and Ain't Jack, no, we don't ever stay on topic. And in my credit, Dade, it's only 12 minutes left, and we're just now getting off topic. So that's pretty good. I think that might be a
Been
new
off
record.
been off topic for the last 20 minutes.
That's still a record.
All right, you know
Well,
what?
for you,
If you guys have never played it though, if you want good horror games, because AAA developers don't produce good horror games anymore, as much as I hate to say that, go look at indie developers, and if you need any evidence of that, just look at Amnesia: The Dark Descent.
You
Well,
ever
That
no,
play? You ever play Layers of Fear, Doku?
oh yes.
Oh, that is an indie piece of horror game. That's like one of my favorite games.
I've read
It's probably
Dante's
one of the best one that's
Inferno,
it's probably one
actually,
of the best
Dade.
that's ever been done.
But no, you know what I would do, Doku? This is the game I would make. You remember Tall Tale Games, right? how they had the series, right? You would pay $4.99 for chapter 1 and blah blah blah, right? Do that.
The episodic. They were the first one. They were one of the first ones to do episodic gameplay.
Yeah, do that, but Tales from the Crypt or Creep Show.
Actually,
That would be cool. Actually,
that's what damn, I forget the name of actually maybe it is Telltale Games. Did you ever at least watch Man of Medan?
Man of Medan.
Yeah, bro.
Until Dawn was better, though. I gotta say, Until Dawn was better, but Man of Medan was alright. Did you see the trailer for Little Hope, their new episodic game or whatever?
Oh, I haven't seen the trailer for it, but I already know it's gonna be good.
I'll post it.
Dude, Until Dawn, Man of Medan, like when they do something, man, they do it right. They knock it out of the park because it is very cinematic, and it's, bro, that shit that's horror done right.
Well, Telltale kind of.
Although if I wanted,
thought, are they re-releasing? Are they coming back? Are they releasing games again?
I don't know actually.
Because I thought the Batman game was the last one. They were overworking people and stuff like that. And
I posted the trailer, by the way, Doku.
They got done.
Okay, sweet.
Well, the thing with Telltale Games, I think they disbanded, didn't they?
I don't know actually, but
yeah, because after the last Walking Dead, they stopped.
I think they were talking about it, but I don't know if they actually ever did or not. I only heard rumors about it. I don't know if it ever actually came to fruition.
Yeah, undergoing a majority studio closure with 90% of its present workforce let go on the day that they decided to close up shop, which was September of 2018.
Oh yeah, they're probably done then.
Was that a couple years back?
Yeah, in 2018, Telltale decided to close up shop, and they fired everybody and said goodbye.
It's been that long?
Yeah,
well, I mean,
yeah, I know, right? It's been that fucking long.
Wow. It's only a few years, but wow, it seems longer than that.
Although, Bear Dog, since you're as much of a horror fan as I am, there's only one game that I actually want to see a remaster of, and not a reimagining, but a legitimate remaster.
Uh-huh.
The original Alone in the Dark.
Oh,
that would actually be good if they could pull that off and do it right.
Oh, if they would do, oh my god, if they, oh my god, yeah, oh. And Clock Tower, if they did Clock Tower too, oh my god, that'd be so cool.
You guys, you want to get back to the 80s before we end this, Dade? Here you go. The NES version of Friday the 13th. The side-scroller Friday the 13th. Let's get that back.
Isn't there a Jason? Hold on, isn't there a Jason game already? Like, isn't, like, they did a Jason game and it's like Dead by Daylight or some shit? Or it's where Jason chases you in the cabins and shit, and you try to get away from him.
Yeah, I have downloaded
the actual Friday the 13th game that came out for PS4, which I own physical disc of, that I helped back. Yes.
Yeah, it gets kind of old though. I played it, and even online. I mean, you run to the car, you run here, you run there, and Jason.
The point is, that's a survival game more than anything.
Honestly, it just reminded me of like 7 Days to Die, which is fun, but I don't really consider it horror so much as thriller.
It reminded me of Left 4 Dead, to be honest.
But you remember
I agree.
The original NES game was a side scroller with wonky ass controls, only supplanted by Dick Tracy, the Dick Tracy game that came out in the 90s. But the one that I helped back, that I actually ended up getting a physical copy of, that the reason there's nothing going on with it is because of the douchebag Victor Miller is holding everybody in legal hell right now. That's really more of a survival game, because Yeah, Jason Voorhees is after you. You can either be Jason or any of the counselors, but you're trying to get away from the dude. You really can't stop him unless you're fucking Tommy Jarvis. And your goal is to get away from Jason. Pretty much like unlike in the movies where people are too stupid to figure out how to eat. So it really is more of a survival game, less of a horror game. And it does, and I mean, unless you put hours and hours and hours into it and you've figured the patterns out. If you're new to playing it, or you're rather a modest player, rather you play it occasionally, it really does make you think, because you don't know jack shit where Jason is unless you're Jason.
I mean, to bring it back to, I guess, the 80s, Alien Isolation is a good horror game. I want them to make that into a fucking movie. That would be nice.
That was one with Amanda, right?
Yes.
Should make that a movie, because it's one of those things that, y'all remember how they made Superman Returns, and it's supposed to take place after like the second Superman movie with Chris Reeves. I think Alien Isolation, actually, if you made that, you have, with the technology being what it is, we can make things look older or retro. You can actually have somebody as Amanda Ripley, and chronologically, it could take place within the original quadrilogy. And forget all this Prometheus crap, because that stuff fucking sucks. But yeah, they can make that, and they could even mimic the original movie, and that would do so well, because people are so action orientated and basically stunted by everything else. They don't know what it means to sit down longer than 5 minutes without getting on their goddamn phones. You can make this game, you can make this movie, base it off the game. Kudos back to the original, maybe with the splash of the second Aliens, and you'd be able to give something to think about, because it's based off the game. That don't mean shit. Just don't let Uwe Boll touch it. I'm telling you that right now.
Well, what's interesting, Alien Isolation, when I was playing it, it made me feel like I was in the original Alien. That kind of suspenseful horror. Oh my God, where is it? There's only one alien, but Jesus Christ, the whole game, I'm sitting on like the edge of my seat the whole time.
And that's and Metroid was not based off of Alien, but that game was the atmosphere was taken directly from the original Alien of Isolation. And that's what a lot more horror movies and video games, especially dealing with horror movies, that could be based off 80s franchises, like, say, Alien, or hell, you could make an Alien game, and then you could actually go and, again, make the Alien Isolation movie. But you need that isolation. You need that alone in the, and when I say alone in the dark, I mean like you're fucking by yourself in your house, nobody around you. You fart wrong, it scares the shit out of you somehow. Or that primordial fear needs to be resurrected, and we've lost that. And I think Alien Isolation as a movie would be fucking wonderful.
Oh no, it would be a wonderful addition to the Alien franchise. Let me tell you, it would be a well received one as well. And the DLC for Alien Isolation, I mean, you see Ripley and the whole crew from Alien, and that was so fucking cool.
Some good shit right there.
Well, we're hitting 2 hours. We're gonna wrap it up. But I have one final thought. If I was to make another idea for a game, would be The Last of Us, but cut out the zombies. Just have a plague. So it's just a survival game where the enemy is other people, not some weird zombie thing.
You'd be kind of busting into I Am Legend territory, the original story that became the Vincent Price movie of The Last Man on Earth, which many, many decades later was the Will Smith movie. You'd be busting into that territory.
I just think it would be an interesting idea, because you could have the prologue, right? The first cutscene that starts the game as the pandemic going, and you could honestly copy and paste modern day media and just replace CVID with something actually deadly.
I'd still want to blame China.
What's funny, like with The Last of Us, I've played both of them, of course, and I didn't really care about the zombies per se. the people, your enemy, the human enemies were the worst part of that game. Like I could deal with the zombies all day long. I would prefer it that way, but the human enemies were really a pain in the ass.
Pretty much like some of the middle seasons of The Walking Dead, where you get to Terminus and you're dealing with other survivors, and then they want to turn around and eat your ass. Eat the stew, you know.
And the other thing is, I think we are as a culture, I think we're getting exhausted with the whole post-apocalyptic zombie kind of trope. I don't know. It might be just be me.
Oh, I think that there are two genres of things right now we're severely burned out on, which is why I'm glad Arrow ended at 8 seasons. We are, and people don't want to admit this, and that's fine. I can take a step back and say I am, which is why I've stopped playing video games, for at least for now, because Final Fantasy Remake just fucking pissed me off. But we're in a culture of nothing but soft reboots, remakes, and superhero movies, and post-apocalyptic era movies, and we are burned out because it wears you down mentally. And I'm not saying let's go make movies that are all fun and fluffy, but let's bring some color back into it to where we're not fucking depressed.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I watched Midsummer. Like it's like a happy horror movie. I can't describe it. It's weird, but I definitely feel you on that. Like maybe we should have something more happy and colorful as opposed to like drab and dreary all the fucking time. Like I know there's superhero movies, they're great and everything, but God,
I'm
we've been
fucking burned out on
inundated
them
in it.
too.
It's
Yeah.
like being inundated in it,
This is why I stay out of this particular realm, because I'm a comic book guy. I stopped reading comics about the time the New 52 ended, and when Tony Stark died in Avengers Endgame, I said, "Hey, I'm officially done." It's like, "Oh, there's no more. There's more movies coming." Say, I don't care. I'm burned out. A lot of it. I think all of us were here from day one when the first Iron Man came out in 2008 till Endgame, and it's just like we are burned out. And if you're not burned out, there's something wrong with you.
or you're a
Because I
child.
love this. That's a fair thing to say. If you're a child or a teenager, that's okay with that. And as much as I love the CW Arrowverse, it's just I'm burned out from that too. You know, and you got it and when you're in your late 20s, your 30s, and your 40s, your mid 40s, like I am, I'm turning 45 in about a month, less than a month. It's like, take a step back from shit, give yourself a breather, so you can come back later and enjoy it again. It may not be as fresh as when it first came out or you remembered it, but you're gonna find something new about it that'll make you appreciate it. And our problem is modern society is it's got to be now, it's got to be now, it's got to be now, it's got to be fast, it's got to be fast. And it's like, oh, we're speed running into a wall and we don't realize it for the most part.
But if they remake a Freddy movie with Robert Englund in it, I'm down. Just throwing that out there.
I think he's getting too old, to be honest. But no, we've hit the 2-hour mark, and my dinner's almost done.
Did anybody like the Child's Play with Mark Hamill in it? I thought that was pretty.
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Okay, I thought it was okay.
I was never a big Child's Play person, but
Just we were talking about remakes of horror movies, and in regards to the 80s of then and now, I thought this one was okay. I'm not a Child's Play fan either, but I thought that Mark Hamill, as the voice of Chucky, did a spectacular job. And I watched and I said, "Yeah, this is pretty good." Would I want to see any sequels from that? Absolutely not. And I think I didn't get into the Rob Zombie movies because they went a little too psychological. I think for me, Halloween 1 and 2, and that's it.
But
you know,
yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. What's your favorite '80s movie? My favorite movie happened to come from the '80s, so I'll just stick with Young Guns, which was a western. Emilio Estevez. I mean, you know the cast. It's got pretty much everybody noteworthy in the '80s. I mean, Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez. I mean,
The Thing.
think as a child, my favorite movie was Transformers, the movie from 1986. I think as an adult, there are a lot of movies from the 80s that I put in easily a top, 25 list. But I really do go, if I really want to watch an 80s movie, I'll go back to Transformers, the movie 1986, because it's action heavy. It's got a story, a beginning, middle, and end, even though it is technically taking place between two seasons of a cartoon. There's an impact there. There's a connection there. It's got a good rock soundtrack. It's got Weird Al on the soundtrack, which is fun, and it's bright and colorful. And it really contrasts today's dark and dreary, bland palette of a lot of mainstream movies.
Okay, Doku, what's yours?
Oh, Bear Dog already said the thing, and I'm tempted to say Alien, but no,
Gremlins.
Blade Runner. Blade Runner.
Which version?
Uh,
The director's
The-
cut, the only version. Come on.
Theatrical.
yeah. The one that has everything.
The version. No.
Shit. That's a red eye we need to have with the four of us just to discuss that.
Just Blade Runner alone. Dude, I love Blade Runner. I don't care what anyone says. But yeah, no, Blade Runner, even if some of the voiceovers are but no, Blade Runner.
That's why I said the director's cut, but
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out. And Ain't Jack, thank you for hanging out the whole time, man. We're gonna end it here because my dinner is pretty much done, and I was a lazy bastard, and I made fries and hamburgers in the oven. Yeah, that's right. My wife's not here to yell at me.
Let him, Bear Dog, yell at him.
meh.
So we're out of here. Thank you. Good night. Good luck. Don't go to France. Hell, don't go to Portland.
It's the French. Don't go to Portland. Jesus.